My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. We've been involved in a study of the resurrection of 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I've been sharing with you the parallels between 1 Corinthians 15 and Romans chapter 8, focusing on Romans chapter 8 and what it said. Now, very few scholars doubt or deny that connection, that parallelism. But in Romans chapter 8, Paul said the whole creation groans in labor pains until now. And I've been sharing with you that concept of the messianic birth pains, the messianic woes. In Jewish thought, all throughout the Old Testament, the messianic woes, and this is called the Great Tribulation. Okay? It's the end time suffering. But the Great Tribulation and the resurrection are inextricably bound together. I've given you, and we have examined text after text after text in the Old Testament in which the Great Tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble, and just the woman being in travail, i.e. Israel being in travail, giving birth to the kingdom, giving birth to the judgment, giving birth to the resurrection. Hosea chapter 13 and 14, which is the very text that Paul uses for his doctrine of the resurrection, ties the birth pains with the resurrection. Now, folks, when the Bible ties the Great Tribulation with the resurrection, as it does in Isaiah 25 and 26. It does in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. It does in Hosea 13 and 14. So when the Bible makes that connection between the Great Tribulation and the resurrection, you and I have absolutely no right to insert a so far 2,500, 2,600, 2,800 year gap of time between the Great Tribulation and the resurrection. Now, obviously, the incredible fact about this is that these birth pains and the Great Tribulation are specifically stated by Jesus to occur in the first century leading up to his coming in the judgment of Jerusalem in AD 70. I want you to notice, and by the way, in the Preterist Pilgrim Weekend, July 12 through 14, 2018, in which we're going to be talking about getting back to the basics. What are the basics of covenant eschatology? My lessons are going to focus on Matthew chapter 24. No one doubts that Matthew 24 is Jesus' most extensive discussion of eschatology. Most attempt to divide Matthew 24 into two subjects: Fall of Jerusalem and the end of the world. I'm going to share with you that Matthew 24 and 25 are one united discourse, not two, and that is related strictly and solely to the end of the Old Covenant age in AD 70. Now, what that means is, if Matthew 24 and 25 is all about the end of the Old Covenant age in AD 70, then since Matthew 24 and 25 serve as the source for most, if not all, of the New Testament doctrine and teaching of the coming of the Lord, judgment, and resurrection, that means the rest of this teaching is likewise about the coming of the Lord in AD 70. Okay. Now remember, Paul said the whole creation groans in labor pains until now. What was he looking for? The resurrection, the redemption of the body, Romans 8:23. All right? Where did Paul get his doctrine? Where did Paul get his gospel? Where did Paul get his eschatology? Well, in Galatians 1, 11 and 12, Paul said, "This I certify, brethren, that the gospel which I delivered to you, I did not receive it by man, nor by the teaching of man, nor from an angel, but from Jesus Christ himself." Pure and simple. Okay. Now watch this. Matthew chapter 24, Jesus told his apostles, "Many are going to come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, pestilence, earthquakes, various places. Watch this. Catch the power of it. These are the beginning of sorrows. Well, the word sorrows there is not a good translation. These are the beginning of the birth pains. Oh, by the way, it's the same word as in Romans chapter 8. The whole creation groans in labor pains until now. Paul's writing, by the way, in the late 50s in Romans. And in the late 50s, all of the things that Jesus mentioned in Matthew chapter 24 were taking place in the Roman world. So here's Paul writing in the 50s at the time when everything Jesus foretold was taking place, and he says the whole creation groans in labor pains until now. What were the labor pains to bring forth? The resurrection. But he got that from Matthew chapter 24, where Jesus said all of those things, wars and rumors of wars, famines, earthquakes, perils, etc., were the beginning of the birth pangs. The birth pangs of what? The kingdom, the judgment, the resurrection. Now, folks, if the birth pangs of Matthew chapter 24 are the birth pangs of Romans chapter 8, then since Jesus said, okay, these are the beginning of birth pangs, and Paul said the birth pangs are here, then that meant the resurrection was to happen in that generation. Why? Because Jesus said in Matthew 24, verse 34, verily I say unto you. Look, anytime Jesus said, verily I say unto you, you can take it to the bank. Verily I say unto you, this generation will by no means pass until all of these things are fulfilled. The Great Tribulation, the birth pangs of Messiah they were in that generation. Since the Great Tribulation and the resurrection are inextricably bound together, then that means the resurrection, the judgment, the coming of the Lord, and the kingdom was to be in the first century at the time of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Let me encourage you to get a copy of my book, The Resurrection of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 2, Fulfilled or Future. In this book, I chronicle text after text after text that links the Great Tribulation with the resurrection. Let me reiterate, folks, you cannot divide the Great Tribulation from the resurrection. If you admit that the Great Tribulation was in the first century, the resurrection was in the first century. So get a copy of my book. Go to my website, BibleProphecy.com or DonKPreston.com. Well, thank you so much. Lord willing, we'll continue this to show the relationship between those birth pangs, the Great Tribulation, coming of the Lord, the judgment, and the resurrection in the first century. On the flip side, we'll see you there.